Welcome to this video from Pack 3 of the Connect Me series, Celebrate Your Street Together. Unit 2, Reading Your Place, the Natural Environment. I'm Alistair Ganley, one of the directors of Interwoven, and I'm joined by Jojo Spinks, who is the founder and originator of the concept. What is topography? What does it mean?
You know, I love topography. And I'm very aware that I'm probably a bit odd in that I love topography. But for me, as my original discipline was in landscape archaeology, it sits underneath our understanding of this concept of place that we were talking about last time. And it sits under so much about that relationship with place. And I'm going to go slightly cross-eyed and bring up the shared screen that I've got ready from unit 2. Here we go. This is the Topography of Exeter. And there are a couple of, so this, you can see the shape of it, the skeleton of it. And
so, yeah, it's bizarre. Just looking at it, it looks like a map of the world. It's extraordinary.
and this is the Earth's crust. You know, it's made up of these elevations and these valleys, and the impact of that has been profound in our relationship with place. So, for instance, if you look here. Okay, so you can see I've popped a little description of where my cursor is at the moment. So this is the area on the map that I'm discussing. I'll clear that so you can see it properly. You can see the lighter green area is the centre of Exeter. And you can see the purple strip coming down on the left there. That's obviously the River Exe. Now, the reason Exeter is where it is because of that bend in the river that just sort of cups the bottom of the city. And then that kink, and I'll put that box back in right there, that kink in the river, which creates a natural quay. And then you've got a little bit of a purple run up to the city that runs up Coombe Street, right up into the city centre from the quay. That's why the city of Exeter is there. That's why the Romans built the original fort, because you've got the river, you've got the quay, and you've got a routeway up a valley into the city itself. So the city sits on a spur of the land, overlooking that landscape, overlooking any other traffic coming up the river. Topography has profoundly influenced why we're here as a city. And that's the same for almost any other place. Human habitation and settlement will be influenced by the topography. And do you know, it gets me so excited. I love topography. And I'm so sorry that it may not speak to other people. The other thing, Posler Road. So I'm sort of hovering my box there to indicate, but you can see it runs from north south. Posler Road runs down a ridgeway. You can clearly see that. So it runs along there and comes down Barrack Road. And Hoskins, W.G. Hoskins, is one of the fathers of this approach, this landscape approach.
Yes, I've come across his name. I've come across his name before, but I knew it was historical, but I didn't know about him.
Yeah.
What exactly he did. Is he local?
Yeah, he lived locally. So he did a lot of work on Exeter. Some people may be familiar with this one, the 2000 Years in Exeter. He was one of the first local historians to take this really landscape-specific approach, to get out there, to walk the streets and look for the hidden clues in it. So Hoskins has huge influence on the School of Meter way of thinking, on me as an archaeologist back in the day when I first discovered these approaches. And of course, his 2000 Years in Exeter is incredibly well known. It's very well thumbed indeed, as you can see. A big hero of mine and of many other people as well. So he was one of the first people to pinpoint that Posler Road ridgeway and how important it was, probably way back into pre-history.
Right. Yes, so of course it's a massive straight line all the way up from the river.
Yeah.
Along, and then Mount Pleasant and up into Stoke Hill.
Yeah.
It's just one long continuous pathway up to a high point.
It is. Yeah.
Wow. And
So
so that was being used when?
well,
Do we
as I
know?
say, it could well go. Hoskins surmises it could well go back into prehistory as a route way for moving through the landscape.
Wow. So this sense of history in the landscape, how can there be history in the landscape before we're thinking about people? Because we always think about history around people, kings and queens and people who did stuff. So how is there history before buildings?
Yeah. So yes, before we built up, and I guess this is the illustration, and the Postal Road Ridgeway is a great way to illustrate it. Yes, there are buildings on Postal Road now, but most of them date to early Victorian period. So what was there before? Can we call it local history if there were no buildings there at all? Well, according to Hoskins and according to me, yes, because I think what we're talking about is relationship to place. And so the relationship to place before the buildings were there, even before the Romans built the city on that other spur of this piece of topography, the relationship to place may well have been traveling through. So it might have been using that route way to get down to the river from the higher ground. But it's still a relationship to place. So we've still got humans acting with, moving through, having the kind of relationship that we were talking about last week, making histories, modifying the landscape, thinking about how they might like it to be in the future. We've still got a human relationship with place, even before we started building and settling and stopping in place. In fact, if you think about it, settling down in a place is just one way of relating to it, and there are others.
So yes, I mean it's interesting that you think about, I know where I am up in Pennsylvania. I know that where I live was up until the 1950s pasture land. There was a big farmhouse, and there were pastures around here, and that sense of there being pasture land so close to the city centre. So how small was Exeter? So it brings all of those elements of the layers of history. You suddenly think land use, but also land passageway, like the tracks that you get in grass, depending on that you find in wild places where animals naturally go and wear down a pathway. So it it's a logical place for people to go, people to be, and streets perhaps generate from those natural routeways through place.
And when you think of desire lines, wherever people come together and interact socially, and repeatedly in a particular place, they will impact on that place. So there is that relationship. You create desire lines from the social interaction that you have, and then the relationship you have with the landscape. So it's not all about settlement. It's not all about buildings. Our relationships with place go way back into prehistory.
I love the idea of desire lines. I think it's a fabulous phrase. But it makes it very, very vibrant and vital. We're here because we want to be here. We're going here because we want to go here or there.
Yes.
And that sense of purpose, I think, is something that's very energizing, particularly if you're looking at a street. There is that line that's driving people and has driven people along that space for potentially many, many hundreds of years, if not millennia.
Yeah, we've got a lovely example in Heathertree, Exeter, where they built the health centre on a patch of land that used to have a diagonal path through it. That, looking at maps, could well have been way back into prehistory, and people have lots of modern memory of this lovely diagonal path that you could go through. It was a meadow at the time. before they built the health centre. And there is now a really emphatic desire line of people cutting through in a diagonal way through that space. And it always makes me smile when I see it, is that that's the way that people want to relate to that place, regardless of what they've built. They're going to cut through, so they've just created it for themselves.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it's kind of in the psyche of the people. It's sort of, the landscape is affecting the way people want to be.
Yeah.
And that's a fabulous example, because it really proves how desire shapes our pathways.
And the heritage of a place, you know, it's got legs even when we try and build over it.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier this idea of prehistory. Now, I always think dinosaurs when I hear the phrase prehistory, but obviously it's not that. So when what does that phrase mean in this context?
Yeah, so in archaeological terms, and I will hark back to my archaeological roots, but in archaeological terms, essentially it means everything that was before written record. So history is the study of the written record. So in terms of Britain, that tends to be at the point when the Romans brought extensive written records. Before that, we do have some written record from the late Iron Age, from the Celtic peoples, around the time, just before the time of Christ, just 0. But really, we tend to think of written records arriving in Britain with the Romans. At the beginning of 2,000 years ago, and therefore everything before that, everything before 2,000 years ago, is prehistory.
Right.
So it's really, in archaeological terms, in people terms, nothing to do with dinosaurs whatsoever, because as we know, dinosaurs and humans didn't overlap in geological timescales. So in archaeological terms, prehistory just means everything before the Romans, everything before 2,000 years ago. So that includes the Iron Age, and then going back to the Bronze Age, and then going back to the Stone Age. All of that was without written record. But of course, it's not without landscape record.
So we're talking, so in those senses, we're talking about sort of ancient hill forts and that sort of thing.
Exactly. So very emphatic place relationships, but we don't have the written records to back up what that might be.
Right. Great. Thank you.